Welcome everyone to our February Cache County Planning Commission meeting. We are delighted to have you here tonight because our meetings are usually not well attended. So this means we're looking forward to hearing from you. We'll begin the meeting. We begin our meetings with opening remarks, and tonight it happens to be my turn. I'm going to give my opening remarks in the form of a poem. I like to highlight poets from Cache Valley, and this one is from May Swenson, and it's from the book May Out West, published by USU Press in 1996. And the poem's called Earth, Your Dancing Place. Beneath heaven's vault, remember always walking through halls of cloud, down aisles of sunlight, or through high hedges of the green rain. Walk in the world, high-heeled, with swirl of cape, hand at the sword hilt of your pride. Keep a tall throat, remain aghast at life. Enter each day as upon a stage, lighted and waiting for your step. Crave upward as flame, have keenness in the nostril. Give your eyes to agony or rapture. Train your hands as birds to be brooding or nimble. Move your body as the horses, sweeping on slender hooves over crag and prairie, with fleeting manes and aloofness of their limbs. Take earth for your own large room, and the floor of earth carpeted with sunlight and hung round with silver wind for your dancing place. And thank you for indulging me. If you would, join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you again for coming. It's great when we have a crowd, and we hope you'll learn something about local government if this is your first time to a planning commission. Just a little bit of background. As a planning commission here in Cache County, we are appointed volunteers. So that means somebody in some of your elected officials have appointed us to be in these positions. Our work is primarily administrative. We look at items that come before us, whether or not they meet the laws or the ordinance that are in place, and then approve or deny them based on those facts. There are other legislative items that come before us that will go to the county council for final decisions. An example of that would be a rezone, like one of our items tonight. And so an administrative item is more like the campground project tonight, the CUP. So that won't go to the council. We're the final decision maker for the county. So just some interesting background about our job and what we're here to do. And we were appointed to represent a cross-section of Cache Valley and its residents. And so we appreciate your patience, as we're not elected officials, and this is not particularly a profession, so we're just usual folks, I think, for the most part. So our first item here will be a review and approval of the agenda. And staff, what would you like to do on the agenda? Are there any changes to the agenda?
No change, there's no change.
No changes.
Unless you want to address the Holyoke Airport.
Okay, so commissioners, staff has mentioned to us that the item number 3, the Holyoke Airport conditional use permit, that item is on our agenda mainly as an update. I don't believe there's any new information being presented tonight on that.
The last action the commission took was to continue it for up to 90 days. The applicant or the conditional use permit holder has indicated that they'd like some more time to get some more information and prepare that for the March meeting and present all that to you for that March meeting and have the discussion then. I think that's beneficial to the commission and to the applicant or to the permit holder, and would recommend that course. And just use this as an update and not an actionable item.
Okay. That sounds good. And so with that context, were there folks here that were interested in the Holyoke Airport item in particular on our agenda? Okay. All right, so commissioners, we could we don't, it sounds like, Chris, we don't need to remove it, we're just going to give an update.
Yeah, we could just have an update. You could remove it if you wanted to, that's up to you.
So what would commissioners like to do?
If there's an update, I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, do you have any information that's different than when we postponed it?
My recommendation would be that you, if you're not going to really discuss it tonight, don't discuss it at all. Let's wait till the next meeting, otherwise we're going to have the same discussion again in March.
Okay.
And it just will raise a lot of questions and concerns rather than addressing the real issue.
Okay. Good.
I make a proposal that we remove it from the agenda for tonight.
Okay, so we have a recommendation to remove item number 3 on the agenda from our agenda tonight. And so, any other changes?
Second on that.
Commissioners, any?
Just add to that motion to accept the agenda.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor in removing, well, let me ask it this way, if you don't mind. So we can approve the agenda, we can remove that as part of the approval, I would
Do you think,
imagine.
meeting with the applicant right now, do you think you have a way to discontinue?
I'm sorry, third question, the TV's just being very distracting.
No, that's okay. We're just wondering if it's going to be a problem to remove this from the agenda.
I don't believe so, because the last motion from last month, or from December, excuse me, was to continue it up to 90 days.
Okay, so
You're back on the March agenda.
Lane, I would recommend if you want to make a motion, just making a motion to approve the agenda with the removal of the item number 3.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda with the removal of item.
Jason, did you want to second that?
I think you said.
Oh, Brady?
I'll second it.
Okay, so Brady seconds it. All those in favor of the amended agenda, say aye. 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 Any opposed? Okay, so we'll proceed with the amended agenda. Next item is to review and approve the minutes. Did commissioners have a chance to look at those? Anybody see any changes or issues or edits?
Mr. Chair, can I speak to one matter of the minutes briefly?
I think if there's amendments to your minutes that need to be addressed, if there's lack of clarity, there's no reason those can't be submitted in writing. And we can look at those. You could wait to act on the minutes tonight or whatever the commission would prefer. If there are significant issues there or questions there that could be clarified, then that might benefit, and you can amend those or make those changes at the next meeting.
So recommend that the concern be expressed to staff to make those changes? Okay, rather than taking action on these
Correct.
tonight. So that's what we'll do.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our regular action items, public hearing for the Cutler Valley rezone. And we'll hear a staff report.
Sorry, I'm still dealing with paper here, so. Okay, so this is the Cutler Valley rezone. It is a request to rezone this property adjacent to Newton. It is a 65.72 acre property currently in the A10 agricultural zone. They are requesting a zone change to the rural 5, the RU5 zone. The rezone to the RU5 would allow the parcel to be legally divided into a maximum potential of 13 separate lots as part of a subdivision process. Under the A10 zone, the maximum number of lots allowed would be 6. So staff has identified some general information as it pertains to the subject property to assist the Planning Commission and County Council in arriving at a decision. First, it is a legal parcel. It has been in the same size and configuration since August 2006. I was just going to bring up the rezone map here for you that gives some context to the area. So this is part of this staff report. And where did it go? So as you can see from this map, the adjacent parcels immediately adjacent to the property are blue. There are some in unincorporated county and some within the boundaries of Newton. Adjacent parcels with a home in unincorporated county, there are 6 with an average size of 5.2 acres. In Newton, there are 9 parcels with an average size of 1 acre. With the home, as we expand that buffer to 1/4 of a mile, there are 9 parcels in the county with an average, with a home and an average lot size of 4.8 acres. In Newton, there are 40 parcels with a home and an average lot size of 1.4 acres. And then when we get to the purple or lavender color, that's the half-mile buffer from the subject property. There are 16 parcels within unincorporated county with a home on it with an average lot size of 7 acres, and then 107 parcels in Newton with a average lot size of 1.1 acres. So the adjacent uses themselves are primarily single-family home, agricultural, and again, the boundary of Newton is immediately adjacent on the east boundary of the subject property. Parcels that are located in Newton adjacent to the property are zoned single-family residential zone. It's their R1 zone. Based on Newton's land use ordinance, the R1 zone requires a minimum lot size of a 1/2 acre, a minimum lot frontage of 148 feet, and a maximum density of 2 units per acre. Comparably, the county's RU5 zone requires a minimum lot size of 1/2 acre and a minimum frontage of 90 feet, with a maximum density of 1 lot for every 5 acres. The Newton annexation area does cover a portion of the subject property, but not the entire piece. Let me add that layer here so you can see exactly where it is. So it's in this pink color. You can see here's the subject property that is not within the annexation area as it's currently recorded. It's about 35 acres that is outside based on my rough measurement there. And then as identified by the Planning Commission and County Council at the time the RU5 zone was adopted, the anticipated placement of this zone is in areas of the unincorporated county adjacent to municipalities. The nearest RU5 zone from the subject property is north of Clarkston. So just by direct route, as the crow flies, it's about 6.2 miles away. It was the Riggs rezone. It included a total of 12.5 acres, and it was approved last year. It would allow, under the RU5 zone, a maximum of 2 buildable lots. Currently, there has not been a subdivision application submitted for that property. The code does Identify the purpose of the RU5 zone to allow for residential development in a low-density pattern that can allow for rural subdivisions and smaller-scale agricultural uses. This type of development should be located and designed not to unreasonably impede adjacent agricultural uses, nor to unreasonably conflict with the development standards of adjacent communities. Also, a purpose to implement the policies of the county-wide comprehensive plan, and the zone must be appropriately served by suitable public roads, have access to necessary water and utilities, and have adequate provision of public services. As you can see, access to the subject property is from actually 4 separate roads. They have access from a UDOT facility, SR 23, as well as from 6600 North, 7000 North, and 7000 West, which are all county roads. All the existing county facilities that provide access do so to a few single homes in the area, but mostly provide access to ag lands. They're classified as minor local roads. They consist of an average of 18 to 19 foot wide paved surface. They are substandard as to pavement width and gravel shoulders or lack of gravel shoulders. 7000 North and 7000 West are also substandard as to the required 66-foot dedicated right-of-way. Though the roads are considered substandard, the county engineer believes the improvements required would be minimal. And then all 3 roads are maintained year-round. Public notice of this public hearing was posted online, at Utah Public Notice website, in 3 public places, and to property owners within 300 feet and Newton Town. At the time of the application submittal, the applicant did provide a letter from Newton that is part of your staff report, attachment B. In that letter, it stated that the Newton Planning Commission did not oppose the development, and the town council was split between concern and support. And then the former mayor Rhodes listed a number of personal objections to the proposal. So at the time the staff report was finalized, I hadn't received any other comments, but I did receive 2 comments late yesterday and today. Those are included in your shared drive Google folder. One is from a neighbor immediately adjacent who has concerns about development pattern and water, and then also from council member Peterson of the Newton Town Council. He identifies 2 particular items of concern. Again, the difference in land development. He believes the prematurely developing these lands in a leapfrog manner could limit the future expansion of Newton. And then he identifies that Newton is currently facing a significant water situation and in the process of conducting studies to determine what solutions are needed to provide water for their citizens. So water is a major concern. At the time staff did the staff report, we did draw up recommendations for approval, which you see there. We have also, based on the updates from the Newton Town and the neighbors regarding the water issue. We've also drafted potential conclusions for denial that are in your shared drive. So those are both available for you to work off of. But the conclusions for denial would be based on the substandard roads and the lack of access to water resources. That concludes staff's report. If you have any questions for me.
Okay, thank you, Angie. Commissioners, questions for staff? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Thank you.
Second?
We have a motion and second to open the public hearing on the Cutler Valley rezone. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, just by show of hands, could you please raise your hand if you'd like to give comments on this item tonight? Okay, at least one person. Okay, so we don't have to make too many ground rules unless you're going to want to talk longer than 3 minutes.
I'm very short.
Maybe a couple of folks. Okay, so it doesn't seem like too many that we've got to be strict on our time frames or whatever. So if you'd like to provide a comment on this item, please come up to the podium so we can record you and state your name and let us know what your interests are. Go ahead.
Should I go first?
Sure.
All right.
Brian Downs. I guess I'm supposed to state if I'm for or against. I would say I'm against. My concerns are water, and not just culinary water, but secondary water. The line feeding that property is not sufficient currently. So adding more homes or uses to that to provide 2 6-acre lots or whatever. I think that needs to be looked at along with the road development and increase in that, what has been stated. So that's my main concern.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else like to come up, give your comments?
My name is Martin Empey. I'm a resident of Newton. I'm also the chair of the Planning Commission there, but I'm not speaking officially for them, speaking as an individual now. One of the concerns that we have as the Planning Commission is in the letter that was sent to the county. One of the things I wanted to suggest is that if the commission wants to vote positive on this, I would suggest, or it's my understanding from Lauren Ryan, that you're in the process of coming up with a plan for development, future development for the county. Is that correct? In other words, that's something that they're working on.
The county is in the process of updating their general plan, that's correct.
What I would suggest is if you feel like you want to vote positive for it, is that you maybe delay that vote until that process is done so that it can be passed under future plans. In other words, so it'll fit the future plans of the county. In other words, not do it now, but do it when it fits the plans that are coming with the master plan that's supposedly coming out later this year. So that's my only comment on that.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to give comment? Is the applicant here this evening?
Yes.
Would you like to state anything to the commissioners?
I'm Terry Griffin, and I've been forming that for a long time, 40 years. So basically, we're not interested too much in 13 lots. We'd like to build the lots along the road. I've got a daughter and friends. We'd like to leave the north big portion of that property available to Newton City to do if they need. I feel like they're going to need a church in the future and other things. I've offered to put a riding arena on it and a few things like that. We're mainly interested in the lots along 6600 North and not the whole piece, not tying up the whole piece of ground and leaving it available for future Newton, because I've lived in Newton all my life. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments? Seeing none, I'd welcome a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second to close the Cutler Valley Rezone public hearing. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, commissioners, what would you like to do?
I can't remember. Did they apply for annexation with Newton City?
They did not do a formal application, but they did meet with the Planning Commission and County Council prior to submitting this application to get their feedback, and that's where that letter, attachment B, was the result of. So they have spoken with Newton regarding that.
But they, okay, but they didn't apply.
Other thoughts?
I guess I'll just state my kind of my angle on this. Anytime RU5, RU2, give me pause whenever we do it, because they're long-lasting implications when we do a rezone like that. This one gives me pause because of the location and some of the concerns that we've heard here, because of water is a scarce resource on the west side of the valley. Those are my major concerns. That being said, as we look at the totality of things, how does it fit with the character of the area? it pretty much matches what we see the land use that Newton City has done, as well as the surrounding area. So while it gives me pause, it seems to make sense.
Other thoughts? Brady?
It's been brought up, the city's concerns, and I respect that. I know that prior discussions that we've respected comments from the city. The only thing I see here is the city says that, and I believe this is the past mayor now, but in his notes, he says, my personal position as mayor is that I respectfully request that you deny this land use and subdivision. On the question of whether this area is in our annexation plan, the answer is no, not where the proposed lots would be created. So that right there gives me, you know, I respect the city's standpoint here, but if it's not currently in their annexation plan, I'm comfortable, or I feel that it's the property rights, the property owner, to proceed with this, with their plan here, as well as in regards to what Mr. Watterson said, that it meets, or it coincides with the neighboring property uses and size.
Had it been in the annexation plan, I'd have a different opinion, but since it's not, I'd have to agree with Brady on that, so.
But didn't staff show the map that it is?
Partially.
Part of it is.
Leaves 35, so about half of it out, right?
Yeah.
It's always a challenge when the proposed development appears to be to the south, but that's not what you're hearing. You're only hearing the rezone. So while the commitment is to put the homes off the south road, there's not a guarantee that will happen. You can't condition that rezone based on that. So it's good to consider what you're mentioning and what you've each mentioned, that this is in the annexation policy area, and you have the staff report to give some guidance there, but you can't fully make a decision based on what's promised.
And one of my questions was in regards to the annexation boundary. It appears to be a distance rather than following property lines, for example. So, which always makes it challenging when it splits a property. Absolutely. Yeah. Other thoughts? Nathan?
Angie.
Well, I'm to the same thing that, you know, the property rights, it meets what's in the code. And if you look at that other map, if you go back to that other one, Angie, that shows the surrounding lots. So you've got to the south there, is that A5? What is that zone? Or is that still A10 with those bigger lots?
Just south of the property.
Yeah, those 7 or 8 homes there.
Yeah, it's all A10.
And so if you put even another 13 homes spread out across that whole other piece, it doesn't really change the feel of that as you're coming into town from the south. And that's exactly what this zoning is meant for, is that buffer zone from higher density in a town, which Newton's not high density housing, but to lower density as you move out into the county. So I think it fits perfectly with the code. I mean, there are some of those concerns, some of those aren't concerns that we can deny or not. If the water's the question there, that's not a condition we can deny it on. That's not one of the rezone things we can look at. You can give it credence, but I don't think it's something, you know, that's up to what Division of Water Rights and the property owner to see if they have proper rights to do that development.
We have been given
and
guidance
find those.
by the county attorney to give that consideration.
But I don't think, and I realize that the county is working on a new master plan, but if we hold every property owner that wants to move forward with the project to the county's moving forward with their master plan, that could, I mean, they hope to have it done this year. Something could delay that for 6 months or a year to get that process done. So I don't think I would be in favor of holding someone to the county's timeline on a plan they're working on, because oftentimes those get delayed for multiple reasons.
I would concur
Lane?
with Nate.
Yeah, I agree
How
with
about you,
everything that's
Melinda?
been said. My understanding is that homes actually take less water than agricultural land. And that can depend on how they landscape, but.
I was just going to comment that at the time that they submitted the rezone application, they did submit a subdivision under the A10 standards for 6 lots, and they were all along 6600 North here, so just a comment on that.
Okay. Yeah, appreciate that.
Outside of the annexation area then?
It would be, yeah, the application was considered incomplete because the plat was missing some stuff, that's why it's not on tonight's agenda. But yeah, that is how it was laid out, 6 along that 6600 North under the current zone.
And did I read this right, that 6600 then is a substandard road?
It's only substandard as to width. I believe the analysis from the county engineer is that it's about 18 to 19 feet wide, paved. The requirement's 20, so it's a minimal substandardness. But yeah, the subdivision process would require that they bring that up to standards, as well as 7,000 west and 7,000 north, including the dedications that are missing on those roads.
Maybe hear that again then, obviously.
That's where we can apply those conditions, you know, that, and this is certainly a heads up for the proponent. The expectation on the part of the county, when you come in to subdivide, if we approve this rezone, or even if we don't, and you want to do it at the density of 1 unit per 10 acres, there'll be requirements to improve the roads that are adjacent to the parcel. So the county engineer, in his opinion, said he didn't think that was a significant amount of work, if I recall correctly. So there'll be some road improvements required before anything can be built or a subdivision is approved, right?
Before the subdivision is recorded.
Okay, so that's helpful to know for everyone. Well, it sounds like folks are thinking the same thing here, so maybe we should entertain a motion.
I'd make that motion to approve that rezone request.
So, and just a little more specific on that, we are recommending this to the county council.
Correct.
Approve, put a recommendation.
A recommendation for approval to the county council. Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to recommend approval to the county council of the Cutler Valley rezone. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the motion carries, and this is just the first step in this process for this project. It moves on to the county council at this time. And you can voice your concerns at the county council meeting. Those are your elected officials, and they have a little more leeway in their decision-making. So, for what it's worth, thank you. Moving on to the next regular action item, it's the Hollow Ridge RV Campground Conditional Use Permit. And we'll entertain a staff report on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Well, I'll provide a little bit of a review of this conditional use request located just east of Smithfield, and then provide some updates as to the specific proposed amendments or refinements to this application based on some of the comments received and requests of the Planning Commission. So here's, hopefully most of you can see the one television and monitor where the property's highlighted, showing just over 20 acres in the A10 zone, and just along the east boundary of Smithfield where it's currently vacant land, and then there are surrounding vacant hillside properties with A10 zoning. And the A10 zone currently allows for a recreation facility, which includes a campground, and this is defined as an area with more than 3 campsites that are approved for occupancy for recreational vehicles. The word transients is used, but that's guests, that's vacationers, that's people looking for a temporary stay of 30 days or less. And then a campsite is defined as space to be used to accommodate 1 party in a single travel trailer, recreational vehicle, or tent. Here's the proposed site plan, same as before. Just want to clarify there is a correction to be made in the updated letter of intent. It's intended to be 12 pull-through campsites as an initial phase 1, 28 back-in campsites, and 25 campsites. And I think the letter of intent just had 27 instead of 25, but it's a total of 65 as presented in the previous meeting in December. And here are the, on the right, the pull-through site. On the left, a back-end site. There's been quite a bit of consideration and effort on the, by the applicant to propose campground rules and regulations that would address many of the concerns been raised about noise, illicit activity, and both safety of guests as well as surrounding residents. And so there's been some discussion and a proposal of a variety of the campground rules and regs, and that includes everything from lower speed limit, 10 miles per hour, quiet hours between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m., which is similar to Smithfield City's 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. No objectionable noise or intoxication, drug possession, obscene language, loud outbursts, et cetera. So I just want to point out that over to the right, there's some updates to the proposal, and I'll start with this update in the lower right, in the letter of intent, offers to provide an on-site camp host between 7 a.m. and 3 p.m. And then in addition to that, there would be on-site appointment visits as needed. There could be a local resident hired that can quickly respond and respond to these on-site visits, reservations booked online, and webcam monitoring for safety. A couple of other updates, and these are highlighted in the staff report in the packet throughout, and I'll address each of those items in this presentation as well. But up at the top, there is a letter of intent update to provide a water bucket or fire extinguisher at each campsite. And this is after review and discussion with our fire district personnel, who are here to respond to any questions as needed this evening. But the Planning Commission requested that a water tank be discussed as a possible central water source. And when that was reviewed, the practicality of reaching each campsite from one central source was recommended to be less effective than just having the source right at the site. And the ease of use of a water bucket or fire extinguisher at each site compared to a centralized water source. So that is in addition to facilitating or at least allowing for propane units, which can be set up and rely less on wood fuel, and those are quite popular by RV campers. So that's something we can further discuss, but by way of highlights, that's an item. And then another requested item to visit that the Planning Commission requested be further explored was on-site septic system or sewer connection system or the like. And in reviewing with the applicant, development staff, and the applicant proposed that there could be the pumping service on a one every day or two basis, show up once or twice a day. They anticipate once every day or two to show up and just have it posted and announced that this is the time to have the truck drive around and empty tanks. So it's really a practicality and an efficiency opportunity to provide that service on site through contract. And that was not fully thought through before, but it seems to make good sense, and staff finds that that's a reasonable service for reducing the number of off-site dumps that the tenants might otherwise tend to make. The applicant did hire the agent, applicant Nathan Whitaker and agent Lance Anderson. Professional engineer did provide a traffic study. I will allow the proponent to speak to the details of that as the Planning Commission may request, but staff's review found that there's not a substantial impact, and leave that to the engineering experts if there are specific questions. It is worth also mentioning that the Smithfield City Future Transportation Map, as we not only look at conditions today as documented in the traffic study, but also future planned new streets, including a 1400 East Street and 1000 East Connection Street. 1400 East running adjacent on the west side of the property, that's just marked with a little star. So just a reference to future intentions by Smithfield City to improve connectivity in that quadrant of the community. So just a summary of the conditions which address other specific potential impacts that the Planning Commission asked staff and the applicant to work through. We covered the camp host management and the supervision. The concern of guests on the property wandering onto other properties. There was a look at the requirement for fencing. There is some existing fencing, and staff felt that with the shooting range located, or at least land used as a gun range, located 325 feet to the east, fencing wouldn't necessarily preclude someone from walking up the road to that area, and so felt that the appropriate mitigation could be to maintain or install fencing and post signage saying, kind of warning of a potential gun range use, and to be mindful and to not access other properties that are not associated with this proposed RV campground. We've covered the fire mitigation at each improved camp fire pit with an improved ring and the water bucket or fire extinguisher. A clarification on the right-of-way dedication that the county road manual requires that the property fronting the right-of-way provide a portion of that right-of-way, or the 33-foot right-of-way, and then address and meet the county's major local road standard. And so that sometimes happens on one side of the road onto the property. So that's a clarification there. And then with respect to dust, that there could be dust reducing sprays onto the gravel surface, and I think the frequency and the application of that to be effective is something that could be discussed, or pavement, but either of those staff feels could appropriately mitigate and keep the dust at a minimum with this proposed use. So that is a summary of some of these updates, and be happy to respond to questions at this time.
Go ahead, Mr. Chairman. Are we okay to, I specifically last meeting mentioned the fencing, and then I thought more about the road surface too. Even though you've got in there and or you know, some options, would we be okay to, if the commission felt it was appropriate, to require a 6-foot chain link fence? More specific, and on the roadways, if the commission in general felt it was best, require an asphalt road versus the mag chloride. I know that mag chloride from past experience is effective, but based upon the traffic, I've been at other campgrounds where it's been applied, and it's very effective right after it's applied, but depending on the amount of traffic and how it's maintained, most likely won't hold the whole summer unless that's maintained. You're still gonna have dust.
Okay.
Whereas if we just went with asphalt, it's going to be taken care of.
My sense is that those are good questions and thoughts for discussion and further understanding the findings of fact, and then make your decision to address impacts as you see fit.
Other questions for staff?
Just, you know, on the conditions, I mean, we have this management responsive to guest and nearby resident complaints. While I think that's a good goal, I think it's pretty hard to define, you know, what is responsive, and I wonder if that's putting the applicant in a position to fail, because the definition of what responsive is can be very different from one person to another. I don't know a better way to, I like the goal, but I don't know if the verbiage is quite right.
I appreciate that, and question, Commissioner Watterson, and the first thought that comes to mind is if it is in direct reference to the campground rules that are documented, so that could be a way to pin that down further.
Yeah, and I think that's a good suggestion there. I just hate having a nebulous condition. I don't think it does anybody any good to do that, because then it can just feed into arguments. But if it's squarely defined campground rules, I think that's a pretty simple thing. Otherwise I think we open up any complaint that may or may not have any validity to it, and potentially could make it more problematic situation.
That's well stated. I think campground rules and conditions.
Okay. A question that really doesn't apply to this ground necessarily, but it keeps coming up, is the shooting range. Is that on private ground, or is it on a BLM, or what is that, forest? What's that ground above it?
It's private.
So that could change any time as to whether or not that stays a shooting range or open to the public.
And I think it's more of an informal shooting range presently.
It's very unapproved.
And there are other locations where people shoot, from what I've heard, further east in the canyon and other canyons throughout the county. So,
Chair, I had one question.
yes, sir.
We talked about the water tank and everything. I was kind of to address the shortage of water, and then there were some letters brought up. Was there any, what did we find on the water rights, or was there any?
Oh, thank you. So Smithfield, previous Smithfield city mayor submitted a letter of concern regarding transferability of water rights and sufficient quantity of water rights. And so the note in the staff report is that the applicant is working to convert water rights from, I believe, stock animal use to this use, which is an application review and process that takes time, and potentially securing additional water rights. So that's in process, and we see that frequently with a variety of application types.
And we keep that as a condition.
And adequate water for the landscaping and the spigot at the sites and so forth. So without the water, then the condition's not met for the sites, correct?
Other questions or thoughts?
Just a thought, having the sewer truck come through means less travel on those roads, that so many people are concerned with, even though the engineering study showed that it wasn't excessive anyway. Now at least they're not having to hook up and pull and go down to dump and come back up again. So I like that solution.
Chair, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
You talk in here, a container for a wood fire, but you also talk about propane fire. Is there going to be two sources, two different places where a wood fire goes and a propane? Or are they at both in every campsite, or how are we addressing that?
So the current thinking is that, many carry a propane unit and just set it up and use that for cooking rather than carrying wood or buying wood. And so at this point, the proposal is to accommodate those, have the space for them, but not necessarily provide them on site. That the fire rings provided if they want to purchase firewood, but propane tanks are allowed.
And so just a thought.
But that's a given the fact that it's a campground, so.
Yep.
A thought on that question is it may be included in the campground rules, but that those propane units can only be used in the hardened area where they have it, not out in the landscaping. Right. I mean, it sounds obvious, but sometimes you have to put obvious things in rules to ensure that they're followed.
Oh, in the confines of the campground versus.
What I'm thinking is the hardened area, so there's a patio or gravel or paved area around that, not out in the grass or landscaping area.
That's the spot here.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions for staff? Comments? So, on this particular item, we had the public hearing at our last meeting when this item came forward. So it's at the commission's discretion as to whether or not we want to take any further comment tonight. There's quite a few folks here, so what would the commissioners like to do? Would you like to give folks a chance to comment any further? Do we feel like we've heard all the issues? We want to check in with the applicant, I would imagine.
I propose we hear from the applicant. I'm gonna say most of those comment letters, and there was quite a few of them, they were all much the same. I think we've heard that, and they're very much aware of those concerns.
Okay.
But there's been some questions for the applicant that updates, so I propose we hear from the applicant.
Yeah, I'd like that idea. So let's at least hear from the applicant if they're interested in giving comments. Applicant or agent, come on up. State your name.
Good evening. My name is Nate Whitaker, and I'm the applicant. A couple of concerns that I just wanted to respond to. First of all, the fence, whether or not it should be required to have a chain link fence all the way around. The staff and I and Lance, the agent, discussed, what is the intent of the fence? Is it to delineate the border of the campground? Is it to cage people in or out of the campground? If someone is motivated to jump the fence, they're going to jump it whether it's an agricultural fence or a chain link fence. If it's a white panel fence, if they want to get out, they're going to jump it.
My thoughts on that, because I was the one that mentioned it.
Yeah.
My thoughts were, if your campers have got pets,
Yeah.
or little children, it's gonna help contain them. I know some of the concerns was just, effects of it on the surrounding area, and I felt that fence would help delineate it, and I'm not saying you're gonna be trashy,
Yeah.
but the third thing would be that if there's trash around and it starts blowing, that's gonna be contained to the fence and not travel to the surrounding property. So,
Yeah.
the other important, I just brought it up as,
Yeah.
I felt that it was kind of a meet in the middle with
Sure.
the surrounding property owners to kind of avoid the pets, the kids, the garbage. But
Sure.
if these folks don't feel the same, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. A flip side concern to that is, there's all this concern about fire. You could also argue concern about safety of elderly people needing to flee the fire. And that may be harder for them to climb over a chain link fence. So that, in addition to the aesthetics, those are two things to consider versus just having an agricultural fence. Another thought too is, whether or not you would have as a condition to have a paved road versus a surface treated road. Again, long before the Smithfield residents would be concerned about dust kick-up, the campers are going to be exposed to dust. And I'm incentivized that they're happy. And so if dust is kicking up, they're not going to be happy. I would like to give this treated treated gravel, a shot, and if it requires multiple treatments, then so be it, to keep dust down. But we talked about last time how the purpose of the committee is to place conditions to meet impact, but that those should be reasonable, not placing too much burden on the applicant. I would propose that being required to pave it may be pushing that line. So I would advocate for treated gravel. Any other specific questions for me?
So there's a condition for fencing that's been added. Are you're okay with an east boundary fence, but don't want, say, a west boundary fence or
So there's already a fence up
on the west?
all the way around. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's an agricultural fence. Yep, it's a wire fence. Yep. And And again,
Is it a 3-strand
I believe it's
or is it 2-strand?
3 or 4 strand. But again, the purpose to delineate the property line and to hold a place for signs, you know, to warn against going east to this unofficial shooting range. But also, if we needed to, we could put placards or signs on the west fence reminding people not to wander off on private people's or land owned by private citizens.
The fencing is yours, it's on your property, it's not the surrounding.
Correct. I may have to determine that, but it is along the property lines on both, and so.
Right, so I get that for delineation, I don't get it for hanging signs. If it's the neighbor's fence, then you
Yeah.
probably can't use it for hanging
Yeah.
signs.
I can appreciate that, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Commissioners? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, commissioners.
Excuse me, with all due respect, there's been new information presented tonight that I think a few of us would like to comment on.
Sure, I understand, and so I'm in the process of asking the other commissioners what they would like to do in that regard. I think they recognize that, yes, commissioners, and so thoughts?
My thoughts on that, I wouldn't mind hearing, and obviously there are folks that are concerned about this, and there's some new information that's here. My concern is that if we relitigate all of the same things that we've heard, so my input would be that everything would be germane to the new information, and that maybe we limit the time to a certain time limit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other thoughts?
I'd second that.
Yeah, same thing, like 10 or 15 minutes, but not 30.
So, let's maybe ask it this way. How many folks would like to comment on this issue tonight? So, looks like maybe 6 or 8. Typically our process is to limit folks to 3 minutes at the most. Obviously, many of you probably were able to attend the first meeting, and so we've heard that comment as well as the 65 letters that I think we've received on the issue. So we're familiar with the input that's been given thus far. So your input now is most helpful to focus on any of the new items in particular. So it just helps us understand the issues better. And it's better for you and your case as well to not repeat. So if a previous speaker has already said the same thoughts you have, there's no need to repeat them, okay? So appreciate that. Please come up, state your name. Yeah, we're gonna limit it to 3 minutes, and we'll see how the next 15 minutes goes.
My name's Jenny Orm. We live on Dry Creek Drive, very close to this proposal. We were here last time at the meeting, and I thought it was interesting when you were discussing before ours, there was a proposal in Hiram, and you made the comment, and we printed off the notes, but the whole thing wasn't printed, but you said you took into account Hiram's position on the request. We were happy to hear that because Smithfield Mayor and City Council is unanimously and emphatically opposed to this proposition. So we were able to speak, but then you discussed it, and we were surprised that you kind of disregarded how the mayor and city council felt about this proposal. So we were concerned about that. One thing I wanted to address, KSL was here that night, they printed an article, and everybody has their take, on the article. So I was reading the comments. It was surprising to me how many people said, we need this because of the housing shortage in our area. I don't know if you've read those comments. It got into a big discussion, and I was like very interested in that. Are people planning on living here? And I know there's the 30-day rule. So I did a little investigation and I called some other RV campgrounds. I don't know if you've done that, but I acted like I was interested in living there and staying there. And every single one that I called, when I said, what if I want to stay longer than 30 days? What, because I'm living in my RV. And they said, there's always ways around it. Don't worry about it. Just something out there. That's every RV park that I called told me that same exact thing. Don't worry about it. There's ways around it. So we need to figure out how to make it so there's absolutely no way around that if you decide to pass this tonight. Also, people were, you know, we were put on the pedestal as not in my backyard. You know, they were saying how awful of neighbors we are. That's not the truth. We're not saying not in my backyard. We're saying not in anybody's backyard. Ted Stokes gave a great presentation about setting a precedent of not doing this in the county. It's not been done before. You have the right, your attorney said that night, you have the right to deny this. Do not set the precedent of making other neighbors have to go through this fight and this worry of having a project like this along your backyard. I just keep thinking, have you ever rented a car? How you treat a rental car different than your own car. That's kind of the difference of these campsites compared to our homes. People treat them different. We have a fire pit in our backyard. We have not had a fire in our fire pit for 3 years because I care about my neighborhood. I care about the fire danger. I care about the drought. And you're telling us you're thinking about approving 65 fire pits along the borders of our homes. It doesn't even make sense. People that are coming in for a temporary use don't think about the whole community. They're there for a short time. If they start a fire, they have the luxury of hooking up their RV and driving away. We don't. We watch our homes burn if a fire starts. 65 fire pits you're proposing. He's proposing. It doesn't even make sense. And I checked with all my neighbors, none of us have put fires in our fire pits because of the fire danger. 65 he wants to put in.
Well over the 3 minutes so far.
Okay, all right, I'll stop. But one of the things that came up tonight, well, first of all, they said they hired somebody to do a traffic study. I don't know who they hired, but it looked exactly like him, and we took pictures. Mr. Whitaker, he was sitting there counting cars. Any information that they got is not relevant. It's the middle of winter. We're not putting our kids outside to play when it's 10 degrees outside. Any information that has been submitted or collected in the last month, he was there for a few days counting cars. It's irrelevant. We're talking about summertime. The amount of kids out playing does not even compare to what it is right now. What? Yeah, it was creepy and uncomfortable for everybody.
Our kids were noticing and asking who that was.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the new rules tonight, real quick, 7 to 3 p.m. You're going to have somebody there from 7 to 3 p.m. Does that even make sense? Like nothing bad happens at nighttime? It doesn't even make sense to have somebody on duty from 7 to 3 p.m. How about 3 p.m. to 3 a.m.? How about having somebody there? That makes sense. A water bucket? Are you kidding me? They start a fire and they throw a water bucket on. I'm like, whoops. You think that's going to put a fire out? It isn't. That's ridiculous. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Anyway, that's all I want to say.
Okay. Thank you. So that's 6 of the 15 minutes. Please keep that in mind.
Sorry.
Commissioners.
State your name, please.
Tom Johnson. I live at 300 South in Smithfield. And I would like to address points that have not been addressed before, primarily of a legal nature. I am not a member of the Utah Bar. I did, however, practice law for more than 40 years in New Mexico. So I'm speaking tonight not as an attorney, but in my own personal capacity. What I say may, to some degree, reflect things that are very much already on your mind. If so, I apologize. But as I reviewed the ordinances and state statutes relevant to this proposal, I found a number of things that I think are very significant and which would compel this commission to deny the application. First of all, the county ordinance indicates that the burden of proof is not on the members of the community. It is on the applicant to meet all conditions. Secondly, your own ordinance indicates that these kinds of approvals are not to be given as a matter of right, but special consideration should be given so that it does not interfere with the use and enjoyment of surrounding properties. Call it backyard, call it what you will. Your ordinance requires you to take into account the effect on people in the vicinity. This use is totally inconsistent with the neighboring residential areas that are already in place. Thirdly, your ordinance requires that there be no unreasonable risk to safety. I do not believe this next point has been addressed at all, and I think it is extremely significant based upon the research that I have done. And that is that there has been reference to an informal shooting range 325 feet away. Under state law, not county ordinance, not city ordinances, but under state law, Section 47-3-102 and the following sections. It indicates that if there is an approved shooting range, signs must be placed if it is within 100 yards of such an area as a residence. A shooting range as defined in the state statute is something that has been designated and continuously operated under nationally recognized standards and operating practices. This proposal is to put in places for people, families to stay. Now I am speaking not to the members of the community, but to the residents or the temporary residents of this facility.
Okay, so just so you know, we're at 3 minutes.
I appreciate that, and Mr. Chairman, I would respectfully request being given an opportunity to address legal matters in a few more minutes because they have not been addressed before, and it is compelling, and it must be considered by this group.
You can have my time.
Commissioners, how do you feel?
Did you submit a letter with these comments in?
No, I did not.
How many other folks would like to speak this evening?
If I can yield my time to him, I will.
Certainly fine by me. We only have 5 minutes left, so however you want to spend that time. I think we'll stick to the 15 minutes that we started with.
If you approve of this, you are allowing unsafe practices contrary to state law to exist within this community. I do not think you want that to happen. There is concern, I am sure, on the part of this commission as to what legal expenses it might incur should an appeal be taken from any decision, such as a negative decision. May I assure you, as someone who practiced law for many years, that the cost of litigation filed by a person who was injured in this park because of the proximity of a gun range that is unregulated, not operated by national standards, would far exceed any cost that this county or this commission might incur in connection with a simple appeal. Lastly, I would simply say that the standards that apply to this by law require this commission to take into account the needs, concerns, and impact on neighbors and those in the vicinity. That has not happened with respect to this application. If it is to be considered, this application must be denied under your own legal standards. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. How much time do we have? Do I need to read fast?
3 minutes.
Okay, I'll read fast. Thank you. Commissioners, Chair.
Can you either speak closer to the mic or pull your mask off while you're talking?
Is this better?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. I will read so I don't get salty. Okay, my name is Mooly Miller. My address is 112 South, 1150 East. I live over the field where the proposal for the RV park is, or RV campsite. I'm speaking in opposition, and here's why. The photo of the area presented by Cash Landmark is outdated and doesn't show the new houses that have been built. I am inclined to say that this is a misleading exhibit and I have provided the still frames from when KSL was here in September so that you can actually see the new development backed up next to the pro site, not a Google screen grab. Secondly, in the past House Bill of 2007, HB 375, it states in regards to identified sexual offenders that they cannot reside, which by their definition is more than 3 consecutive nights, within 500 feet of a protected area, that is outer perimeter to outer perimeter. I emailed the lines of that bill over today and mentioned it last week in an email to the Planning Commission, Tim Watkins, and Chris Harold on January 26th. Additionally, when we talk about paving or spraying the dust with magnesium chloride, again, I wonder what the amount is and how much of that gets put into the air and affects residents. Too much can cause dizziness and stomach ailments. And lastly, with Hyde Park identifying themselves as a supporter of an easement into the campsite by agreement of a public trail or access, does this open it up to access altogether, and how does that work for Smithfield residents?
Thank you. Come on up.
Darrell Benson from Smithfield. My biggest question is the sewer. He talks about he's going to have a pumper truck come every other day or something like that. Well, I run a pumper truck for the National Park Service in Moab. There is no connection from a pumper truck to a trailer. They have to have a pit to dump it in, and then that pump truck can pump it out. So, and we run that pumper truck on the White Rim, all the national parks down in Moab. So I can tell you what it takes to run a pumper truck in there. There is no connection. As far as fires, that's not a concern. Biggest concern with the camp park that we run in Moab was they had the fire with the air conditioner unit and the furnace unit. There were structural fires, not grass fires. That's my biggest concern. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask you guys one question? The last meeting where we heard...
You have to state your name
Oh, sorry.
first.
Diana Brown, Smithfield, Utah.
Thanks.
1201 East, 300 South. The last time that you guys visited this, the lady that mentioned the family in Hiram that you declined because of the city's position, but also you were looking for consistency of keeping the area the same. And I listened this evening to the same application process of saying, let's approve it because it's consistent with what's already there. And I would just ask that you apply that same rationale.
Thank you. Okay. Sure, I think we're out of public comment time, so unless commissioners feel differently, we'll have the applicant come back up to address any of the concerns, the new concerns that were raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, a couple things to comment on. First of all, the letter received from Smithfield City did say unanimously, the mayor and the city council are in unison opposition to this. That is not the case. I called Dion Hunsaker, who's a city council member, asked him if he had heard anything about this at all, and he hadn't heard a thing. Nobody reached out to him to get his opinion. And so you can't trust that. You're welcome to talk to Dion. As far as the counting cars, yes, I counted the cars. Whoever it was that was going to count cars will have to be there in a vehicle, counting the vehicles, the pedestrians. And I was very vigilant and attentive. The only time I struggled is when Ted Stokes helped himself into my truck without invitation, distracting me, threatening me that if I didn't do what he wanted me to put up on that land, that
Okay, hold your comments, please.
that he would fight me all the way, similar to how this attorney, similar to how this attorney threatened you. In addition, talking about this shooting range, it's not approved. Historically, there was a gun range there, a formal gun range, approved. It's not approved anymore. And so that needs to be taken into consideration. As far as the sewer, I've talked with Honey Bucket to get an idea from them if they would be willing to come up and do it, and they said absolutely. We've done it with RV campgrounds and parks before. We talked about the community, I can't remember what you call it, a pit, but they said they can do it otherwise without a dump pit. So that was that gentleman's experience, but speaking with Honey Bucket today, they do provide direct services to each RV. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, what would you like to do?
Just for some clarification on the water tank we talked about last time, it all goes back to the water supply, the fire prevention, everything else. One of the things that were brought up was just the fact of, the gentleman brought up that had managed the campgrounds before. I wasn't worried about the fire pits per se. I was more worried about the actual trailers. How would they put out a fire if one of those were to light up? I mean, we're adding.
Maybe have the fire district speak to that.
And so that's why we talked about that, similarly to what the county built at their county shed, where they didn't have fire hydrants, they didn't have fire access to a water source. That's what we were that's what I thought we were talking about. We brought up the container with just a source of water for them to hook into to provide that. So I don't know, was I wrong? I mean,
what do you think? Do we ask the fire chief to come up and? Please. Yeah.
We got him. Chief.
Rod Hammer, County Fire Chief. So what's your question?
So in the past, like when there's not water, a substantial water supply, it's been required for those buildings or those properties to create a water holding system. Similar to Cache County's new facility there in Richmond. They built a 40 by 100, I think it was 40 or 50 by 100. They were required to put in a 30,000 gallon tank. Even though there's water, the sewer ponds, whatever, they said they could pump out of them. They still required them to put in a 30,000 gallon tank. That's what we were talking about. How would if there was a fire, a structural fire, one of the trailers were to light up, how would that be handled?
So the thing you're talking about is for commercial buildings. It doesn't apply to residential or mobile property. So in this case, if there's a structure fire in one of the trailers, then units from the Smithfield Fire Department are contracted to cover a fire up in that canyon. So they would respond with a structure engine that has anywhere from 500 to 1,000 gallons of water. On the first engine, they'll have multiple engines that come in and they'll suppress it just like they do a trailer house fire or any other fire. We have mobile water supplies, water tenders. They take a while to get up there, but typically a RV type trailer doesn't take a lot of water to put out.
Your experience, do they move quickly? If one lights up, I mean,
Yeah.
somebody gets close, that's what's concerning.
You know, we haven't, even trailer houses, you know, we can get some exposure on the next trailer. We typically don't lose more than one at a time, depending on how hot it is. The fire's not gonna burn long enough to wipe out the whole park. It may affect the next unit over, but it's not likely. You know, you can do the what ifs. Yeah, and wind comes out of that canyon in the evening, of course. Wind does affect it, but again, you have a full-time fire department in Smithfield that's responding within 60 seconds to 90 seconds. And so that's covered.
And how about some of the concern with, is a bucket of water or a fire extinguisher sufficient, at each campsite?
Again, it comes down to conditions. You know, the state mandates fire closures under certain conditions, and that falls under the state mandates. We as a county don't set those. They will do different restrictions, whether it's just open fire altogether or your propane devices are allowed but not open fires. If you have a fire that is in a fire pit and escapes a little bit and somebody's there, yeah, you can put it out with a bucket of water. If it's windy, really dry conditions, it might go faster, but again, we've fought fires in that canyon. We've had fires from shooting in that canyon. We've had it on both sides of the canyon. We do have camping regularly up that canyon, and there are no fires, or not fires normally. So again, it all depends. So possibility, of course.
And it's somewhat safe to say that most summers, typical to last summer, and many in recent past, you put restrictions on fires in areas like that anyways. And so during the driest part of the year, there may be fire restrictions there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyways.
Absolutely. You know, the state, there are other dispersed campgrounds and fire area or camping sites throughout the county, whether it's in the Forest Service, state lands, private lands. There are fire pits in the mountains all over the place. And occasionally we do have escape fires, typically from people walking away and unattended rather than something happening in the middle of it. But yeah, when it gets hot, we issue fire closures.
Any other questions for the chief? Commissioners? Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I have a couple questions.
Please.
So if we read in our notes here, number 19, it's on page 8 of 12. The red is the staff update. I'm going to read real quick here. Following the December 2nd, 22 Planning Commission meeting, development staff and the applicant met to discuss the Commission's recommendation to further study existing levels of traffic on roads providing access to the site and the anticipated traffic impact created by the proposed RV campground. The applicant provided a traffic study conducted by a licensed professional engineer that they've provided. I don't have that here. So from what we heard tonight, did we get two reports, one from a professional licensed engineer, or what did we get on that traffic study?
You can come up, Lance.
It's the licensed engineer, and he's here, he can comment.
So during traffic studies, we'll have other people do some counts. So we have our interns and other things, and during that time, they did some traffic counts, so I laid out where we were going to study. So we pulled up, UDOT has several counts already existing on those two roads that were provided, so we used that information. We looked at the intersection. We wanted to look at specifically 300 South and 600 South and see what the impact was to those intersections. So we looked at several days that we took some counts that Nate actually was there and did take those counts. He then provided that. I did an analysis on that. And that's then the letter that I drafted. So you got one study, and it was from me. Okay, so Nate did the traffic counts. Like I said, a lot of times we'll have people go out. I do traffic counts for...
Please don't interrupt? Thank you.
For example, we do traffic studies for other traffic engineers. We'll go out and do the counts and then give them, so that's just the way that the profession works as far as traffic studies go.
It's through your office, so it's
It was
fine.
through our office,
Okay.
yes,
What's your
correct.
name?
Lance Anderson.
Oh, so you're the other owner of the land,
No, I'm not the owner. I am an engineer.
the co-owner.
I am not a co-owner. I do not have any interest in this. I'm only a consultant. So in that regards, we looked at the intersection, did it. Now, there was a comment made as to during the winter. If you looked at it, and I looked at the analysis, a lot of the morning peak was in the morning just right before high school. And you saw that. So if you look at the summer, you're not going to get those turning movements. If you looked at the counts, they were pretty close from 7:30 to 8. Most of it's 7:45. If you look at it, they were turning right and going down to Skyview, which makes sense, right? And so if you look at and take that out on the summer aspect, you got probably less turns in that morning peak time than you would going in that direction. So, but we did take that into account because that is a peak time. There is times that we feel that the RV park would be used during school time, more during the summer, which would then have less of that school count. So that's just some information. Any questions on the traffic study or any information on
Questions for
that?
Lance, commissioners? Anything else? Okay, thank you, Lance.
Hey, maybe you could help us with this. Just wait one more for this question.
Go ahead.
So I didn't even think of this before until our prior attorney, Mr. Johnson, was up there speaking. But, I mean, that property, that parcel right to the side of you is owned by the Sportsman for Fish and Wildlife,
Correct.
which is an active, avid hunting. No, I guess there's ponds property in between.
Correct.
And then
Ponds and then Sportsman's.
Sportsman for Fish and Wildlife. So if I'm out hunting, whatever, I have to be 600 feet to fire my weapon from a building, an animal, whatever else.
Correct.
Has that even been discussed or thought of? So who takes precedence? If somebody comes up there and sets up their .22 right on the property line and starts shooting, where does that 600 feet come in? Does that guy have to move so he's 600 feet from a residence or a property line? Or who's in charge of that and who's?
Of the Sportsman, I don't know what the background is on that one. I thought it was more of kind of the other, but as far as precedence goes, yes, those are the state laws as far as hunting goes. I don't know what specifically there, but, the land use, even if ponds came in and did something and decided to do something with their land. Right, they're gonna be affected, Sportsman is too. That's ponds. Ponds has some property rights and development rights, right? That's what's there too. So ponds could actually come in and do something too.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thanks, Lance.
Uh-huh.
Okay, commissioners, have we heard enough? Would we like to deliberate this item? Thoughts? Who wants to jump in?
Well, I know this issue touches a lot of nerves on many different sides, and I appreciate that. And whatever we do, whether it's building a new house or whether it's increasing the density on a zone, there will be impacts, and that's really this body's duty is to look at those things and determine can those impacts be reasonably mitigated. And particularly with conditional uses by the conditions that we put on that. As I look through these, we've been through multiple iterations on this and communications back and forth. It seems to me that we have a set of conditions here that reasonably mitigate those impacts. Can we eliminate all the impacts? No, and that's where we get in the balance between property rights, between adjacent properties. And so I feel like we've done the work to build those conditions here, and we have an obligation. We have the shall approve within there as long as we can show that we've reasonably mitigated those impacts. And so that's my position on it.
Other thoughts? Brandon?
Condition number 6 is just I kind of held up on the water side of things. In the past 3 or 4 months, we denied a rezone just across the way for I think it was an RU2 rezone or an RU5 on the other side of the road.
And on this property.
And on this property also. This property was never, it was across the street for lack of, and one of the main reasons it was denied is because of lack of water. And then Smithfield City, in their letters, that's one of, in the attempt to annex this property in, it was denied for lack of water. And then here we are, it's an A10, with 1 water share for residential and 10 cattle, I think livestock watering rights for 10 units or 10 animals. But yet we're moving in, I don't know, what it was, 65 units. They're all consuming a water source of some point. We're gonna add pickleball courts, which is gonna require more, people running around. It's just a consumer of water. And the whole reason everything else has been denied up to this point is because of the lack of that water. To this point today, we don't have a water right that sustains the use.
When I read that one, it still may be denied on water, right? If he can't get adequate water and show that in his final plan, it will be denied based on that.
So to my point, how do we determine the adequate amount of water for this conditional use?
That's not our duty. Our duty is to say adequate provision of water.
Okay.
And then there are other entities, state engineer, that determine what that is.
Okay.
He's gonna show how many acres of that he's going to irrigate, and based on that, and how many campsites, the state engineer is gonna say you have to have this many acre feet of water.
But I'm just seeing all these things that take water, and I'm like, we don't have any, so.
And if that's a limiting factor, then that's the condition that would preclude the applicant from doing the use. Okay. And that's the that's the challenge that we get into is we don't regulate, we don't control all of those things, but we can put that in as a condition that they provide adequate water for the use.
How about you, Brady? What are you thinking?
Well, back to my 2 thoughts, I just asked the commission if there's support for doing a defined chain link fence and an asphalt road, great. If there's not, fine too. But I know a 3-string barbed wire fence is not gonna keep stray kids around, pets, or garbage. And when we did the ball court there on the west side of Hyde Park, northwest corner of Hyde Park, edge of Smithfield, that was one of the final requirements, was that they put a dividing fence. Of course, it's a sports park, but there was concern from the neighboring ag producers that a little kid would wander out in the field, they'd run him through their swather or other things such as that. So I was just kind of thinking, well, and then garbage was another concern. So, but I don't know if any of you have been up to the campground up Cinnamon Creek. They've put mag chloride on that road, and if you're there right after they put it on, it works, but it don't last long.
As in a week or 2, a month or 2?
I haven't been there to justify that, but as soon as it dries out, you're getting dust again.
Could I respond to both of those?
Yeah.
I think I prefer to go more to performance standards on this versus saying a chain link fence. I think we want to say what our intent is with the fence. Thinking back to D&D, we didn't say what their fence had to be, but it was to be screening for the use that was there. And so I like more of a performance standard. It needs to be screened, it needs to enclose the use so people can't go back and forth, whatever it is that we decide the purpose of the fence. I don't care what it's made out of as long as it performs the function that we're looking for. If they want to have a pretty white vinyl fence, more power to them if it does what we want in the condition. And the same thing goes with the road surface. What are we concerned about? Well, we're concerned about dust. And so the condition is the road surface will control dust. And if there's an issue, then there's a process to go about a complaint on that and deal with that. So that would be my preference there versus saying, you know, specifying exactly what something should be. It's a performance. Do I care what the road surface looks like? No, we're concerned about dust.
But a chip seal would possibly work.
A chip seal, whatever it is, as long as it accomplishes what we're trying to do. We're worried about an impact. And I don't care what the control works, as long as it controls the impact that we're looking at.
Other thoughts? I would agree with Jason on that. I think it's pretty open. If we feel it's not meeting, or if the residents or complain that he's not meeting one of those conditions, they could come to this board in 2 years, whenever it is, and say that road is dusty every day and it blows down on us. We would assess it at that time and see if it's revoked or if he's got to update it at that time. And there's multiple fences that can meet the need of containment of garbage and kids. It wouldn't necessarily have to be a 6-foot chain link. A 2 or 3 stand barbed wire may not do that, but there's a lot of other options out there.
I mean, there are certain things that will specify that. If there's a swimming pool, there's a code that says there has to be a fence that you can't get a 4-inch spear through. Well, that's something that's very specific, but that's not what we're looking at. You know, what are we trying to accomplish with the fence? I don't care what it looks like, within reason.
So from what I'm hearing then on number 7,
Yeah.
I guess it is number 7. Mm-hmm. Do we just want to put an enclosure around the entire premises that would keep potential garbage, children, or pets from leaving the premises? Is that our concern, or do we care? The east side concerns me more than anything, but the wind blows west, so that's the direction that the garbage and stuff would go. If there was a problem, but I don't anticipate it, but if you guys aren't concerned, I'm fine with it.
As you go, I don't know how many of you have spent time in the campgrounds in Logan Canyon or anywhere else. As you drive through, there's garbage blowing around typically isn't a huge problem. I mean, I guess if people are staying there for 3 weeks, maybe there's a little more. My office is at the fairgrounds. There's people camp there often. They're generally keep their areas fairly clean, from what I've seen. So I don't know that blowing garbage is going to be a huge issue, but certainly a small, a fence could contain that. A woven wire fence would contain blowing garbage. But I'm fine with that.
But I think you're right. I mean, there's the opportunity in number 7. And we see in there, fencing delineating the property boundaries must be maintained or installed, signs along with that. So really what we're looking at in there is just defining property boundaries. We don't say anything about containing people,
Safety.
containing trash or anything like that. Right. So that's, if we wanted to work on that condition,
Yeah.
I can support that if that's the opinion of the commission, is that's a big enough concern that it merits that.
Or is that another item like, if I go there, if I'm a camper and I want to go there and it's trashy, like I'm not going to go back there. And if I've got little kids and they're getting cut on the barbed wire fence, I'm not going to go back there. Some of these things he may decide to change for better business practices. I do like the idea of someone being there after 3 p.m. I know, like the code, remind me again what the code allows. It doesn't allow a 24-hour host.
They could do 24-hour, that's fine. They just
Can't
can't live in the,
live there. Can't live on site.
But he could have like 3 different shifts of
Certainly.
people there.
yes.
So I would be inclined for an evening person.
And there is also the webcam monitoring, kind of a combination of host, webcam, on-call.
Okay.
It's a suite of things there.
And I guess we not that just what other places are doing, but I think about a Forest Service campground. Are the campground hosts there all day, all night,
And they're in their RV, maybe watching a movie anyway.
and
The difference I see there is the Forest Service campgrounds are being paid by the Forest Service.
Mhm.
You know, if his phase one has 12 campsites and we're gonna require a 24-hour full-time person there around the clock, I would think that that's a little unreasonable request for 12 campsites. I don't see how that would ever be a profitable business proposition, because he doesn't have the federal government paying his campers in that situation.
That's fair.
You know, if there were 100 campsites, if it's a KOA where you have people, you know, they have full-time people there, the showers, you know, it makes more sense in a situation like that. But with 12 or even phase two where, you know, at 65, maybe that makes more sense. But certainly phase one, I don't see a full-time person being justified there.
That's fair.
Other thoughts? Lane, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking that he's met all the conditions that we put out there, if he can meet those conditions of that we've delineated here. I'm for property rights. He bought the ground and it meets the criteria of for a campground. And I've done business in Smithfield for a lot of years, and everything grew in around me, and suddenly that wasn't a good place to be anymore. And so now it changed use. And has a nice dry hillside, and everybody could go play up there. Back as a kid, I rode motorcycles all over that country, and you don't do that anymore. So it's a change of use, and he's met the conditions, I see.
Thanks. Any other thoughts, Melinda? Okay. I mean, back to your question for me, Brady, I was more concerned about the fencing, just for security reasons, just more to keep inadvertent trespass, whether it's kids or whatever, either leaving the property or others coming onto the property, that sort of thing. So I would be in support of beefing that up if it's,
I would also.
if others are supportive of that as well. The paving of the road, I could see a lot of benefit to that, but I don't feel as strongly about that. Like I could see the mag chloride. I've seen work. That road to the south of Manaway Reservoir has been mag chloride maintained by the city for as long as I can remember, and it's never dusty. I never see it. And there's a lot of traffic on that. So I think it can work in the right context. So
If I could just briefly mention, there are a variety of sprays and treatments, and that was
Sure.
just one.
You bet.
Cited as an example.
Anyway, those are my thoughts. Nolan.
I'm sitting here listening to the fence thing, and I go back to the soccer field thing. I think we talked about the number of people being there. Soccer fields are used pretty much daytime, nighttime. I'd like to know how many people are going to be at this campsite and compare that's 724 versus a soccer field. So from my view, and I'm not a voting person on the commission, but I lean with Brady that what we took in consideration on the soccer fields was little kids and going out beyond there. To me, this is just as relevant as the soccer fields and the youth, because you're going to have that many campsites eventually. I understand 12, but there ought to be something in there if we're talking the number of people in that campsite versus the number of people who were at a soccer field, and the time of a soccer field and the timing of a campsite. So I see some correspondence and some connection there as to what we did on the fence site. So I align myself with what Brady's points are. I think they're valid.
Yeah, I'm not against the kid and trash thing on it.
yeah, I think that's a reasonable condition that could be placed on that. What type of language would you prefer there? Fencing delineating the property boundaries and restricting access.
I was going to ask maybe if staff could, any chance we could pull up that condition from the soccer field that we.
Yeah, we could probably we need to have access, Tim, if you can disconnect.
Sure. I was thinking maybe that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Less folks
I'll put
have
just,
something specific in mind.
yeah, we can pull that up. It's interesting to me. I don't see those uses as correlating because one is an active use soccer field. Kids are kicking a ball or chasing a ball. The fencing, from what I recall, was for kids kicking the ball into the road, retrieving the ball, or kicking a ball into a field, or kids that came with that family going to that. To me, those uses aren't the same as an RV park. They have similar impacts. I think the concern last time was the road and the kids in a farmer's field getting caught in a combine or thresher, whatever it is, right? Whatever machinery is there. It sounds like the most considered issue here isn't necessarily trespass onto the adjoining property with the ponds, but a kid or somebody going as far east to the unofficial shooting range. And that's the challenge I face, is it's an unofficial use. It's not a permitted use. And so I would have a question about the impact of the perceived impact of this use on that use and how that's being balanced. When the road that goes up to the shooting range is just to the front of it, you walk up the road to the shooting range. I think the fencing might prevent someone from coming around the back to the end of the shooting range. And it becomes more of a question of, do we have to have an enforcement question with the shooting range if it's being used inappropriately as more of a public or a consistent type of use? If you go up any canyon, they're shooting into those areas, and it's been typically permitted. So that's a kind of a challenge for me to see what the distinction would be between what was an intentionally active use and something that's not an intentionally active use. I'm not opposed to the fence either way. The question comes to my mind is,
I don't
What
think
about,
that-
what about the folks playing pickleball and chasing after their pickleballs?
they don't go as far as soccer balls by a long shot. But and it's a separate property away, so I think there's a real question about what real impact is perceived and what real impact is real with somebody walking over to that site and being unaware that there's a shooting range there and having a tragic type of situation. If a fence is sufficient to prevent that, is signage sufficient? If it's a young kid, they're not going to read it, they're going to jump the fence and they're going to go explore. So I don't know, you have to figure out where that balance is between what's a sufficient level of fencing and what is not. What's the balance?
And that's kind of, I mean, I think I was less concerned about the shooting area than I was just people trespassing, leaving the site. We're bringing a pretty good, I mean, this many sites will bring a significant number of people. You put enough people in enough places, they'll wander out of there. And so the language that I was thinking of in there was to restrict people's access to adjacent properties.
Yes.
And that's more of the concern that I have as an ongoing impact. Are people, hey, that's a pretty field over there. We'll go over and have our picnic over there. That's really what I envision that the fence can do. And then there was the other issue of trash. I don't think that's probably a major concern. I was thinking more of just delineating the lines and restricting access to people.
However that
Are you
looks.
comfortable with that?
Oh, I wanted to raise that question because whether your decision is to make it a more secure fence or not, there's that balance so that you're not over prescribing.
And that's why I was looking at performance-based. If we say restrict access to adjacent properties, you can build a barbed wire fence that restricts access for people to be able to go through. You put a 6-wire tight fence
with signage,
and that can restrict access. So I don't know that it's an undue burden on that versus a chain link fence that would come with significant cost. And not that cost is always a consideration on that, but can we restrict or can we control or mitigate the potential impact?
It may require an improvement to what's presently there. If it's
Yes.
a 2-strand or 3-strand, it may be insufficient.
And that's why I look at that performance on that. Restrict access. Well, if it's a 2-wire barbed wire fence and it's in poor condition, well, I can step over it. I can go straight through that. That doesn't meet the performance side of that.
Families that camp with their animals, how would they keep their animals safe from wild animals coming into the campground if it's not a barrier like that? If wild animals coming
So I just like to speak to specific fencing conditions, and they were arrived at the end of the review, but along this, I'm sorry, I don't see the street, but there's no fencing required here because it was not a concern of a ball bouncing off of a field into this road. However, along the street frontage of E, it was not necessarily a fence, but a berm, a barrier, landscaping of sorts to prevent balls from going out into the road. And then this west and south boundary adjacent to current agricultural practices was the concern of kids mixing with potentially farm equipment.
So what you're saying is maybe the fence is not the adequate thing. We should say fence or fence, berm, landscape and berm, or a combination of landscape and berm.
I think
other means to restrict access.
I think that the point here is just that the context of the use on the property on each side, and then the potential conflicts or risks associated with the use and the edge were looked at individually. And so in this case, it was projecting soccer balls.
And what I was asking about, Tim, was more the condition, like the wording in the condition as opposed to,
sure,
that specific decision.
Which I have here.
Anyway, other thoughts while pulling that up.
Here's the wording for so along street, the north street, it was a berm, fencing, or other protective screening along 4200 north to limit errant balls from projecting the public right-of-way. And then 7 was a minimum 6-foot tall permanent chain link fence or similar fencing must be placed and maintained on the west and south sides of the property. And it didn't get into the details as to why, but it was discussed in the minutes.
Even that may be more detailed than folks are thinking for this, but.
My vision of that is fencing delineating the property boundaries and restricting access to adjacent properties.
Yeah.
Shall be whatever the rest of it says.
And do we care about, do we just sign it, that where you say it's private property on the other side?
And it
or is
already
that the other
includes that,
property?
correct? It includes that and signs must be placed on the east side of the property, warning campers of potential hazards.
Specific to the gun range.
Formerly used gun range. We could add additional to that sign, and signs must be placed on the fence, both warning of potential hazards and notifying
Property boundaries.
notifying users of property boundaries. I'm happy with that.
Good,
Could I raise a point of order?
No, sir. Any other comments from commissioners? Are you guys?
Is
is
30
anyone-
nights the standard?
What's that?
This guest overnight stays must not exceed a total of 30 days.
That's the
That's in
county's
the county code.
requirement.
Is that for the facility or for the site, for each individual campsite?
Each individual
Okay.
per
So they can move
per
around.
user.
They could.
They can't move to another site and start again.
They cannot.
They cannot.
They cannot.
Okay. So that was it.
That condition specifically limits that.
Any other comments or questions? Would someone like to make a motion? If there's no further discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the Hollow Ridge RV Campground conditional use permit with the associated 15 conditions and 2 conclusions, with the addition of condition 7 that states fencing delineating the property boundaries and restricting access to adjacent properties must be maintained and or installed, and signs must be placed on, I want to strike the east side, on property, on the fencing, warning campers of potential hazards and property boundaries. You okay with that one?
I'll second that.
That's my motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
I have additional discussion for their commission's consideration for
Okay.
condition 2. You asked for additional language to be specific to the complaints and to change it from being too vague to be more specific. So it could read at the end from the point of, and be responsive to guest and nearby resident complaints specific to noted campground rules and regulations and permit conditions. I would recommend that as an amendment to that.
I amend my motion to reflect Chris said.
Staff's recommendation. Nathan, do you? Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion, commissioners? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the motion carries. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is item number 4, training opportunity. Okay, please be quiet as you leave.
You won't listen to us. Thank you for bringing all of our.
Staff.
Training opportunities, is that our last, almost last item?
Yes, sir.
I'll address that. I don't know if you were planning to, Angie or Tim, but I'm happy to address it. Oops. We have that recording over here? Yes. Okay, excellent. All sorts of technical difficulties tonight. Apologies, we're not sure why. I tried having Janine help me and we couldn't figure it out either, so we have that recording, hopefully.
Great.
Yeah. Training opportunity, Wednesday, the 9th of February. That's coming up pretty quick here. There is a great training that the Utah League of Cities and Towns is putting on. At our county event center, they're making 2 sessions available. It's free. You do have to register though at that website. They're also going to provide you a book, and it's very specific to land use regulations. So we would encourage each and every one of you, if you can attend the 1:30 to 4:30 session or the 6 to 9 p.m. session, to do so, or as much of those as you can attend. It's going to be highly beneficial. Will Summercorn is one of the folks who will typically be there. I don't know which one he'll attend. Hopefully we'll be both. That's a pretty long stretch of training, so I don't know what portion he will cover. But he handles a lot of our legislative review, legislative updates. He's very familiar with state code, very familiar with any questions you might pose to him. He's got a wealth of experience. I think he's tried to retire a few times and hasn't made it yet. But Wilf is a wealth of knowledge and someone that's good to learn from and listen to. You also have the state ombudsman there, Jordan Colomore, I think I'm saying his name right, who also hears a lot of these requests or concerns, similar to what you heard tonight, with some questions about process or understanding what land use regulations can and cannot do. It's really a great opportunity to have that training, ask any questions that come up. I've forgotten who the other, do you remember who the other person is that was listed? Could you maybe pull that up? My memory's not, I don't recall.
She's looking, that would satisfy our annual requirement or part of
A
it.
good portion of your requirement to 4 hours of training would be captured there. Yeah. You still need to capture your Open and Public Meeting Act requirements and GRAMA.
This won't cover those two
I don't
subjects.
believe they're touching it. With land use regulations, there might be some portion of it, but I would still recommend once a year touching base with those trainings. It's just helpful.
And we can use those same trainings that we did last
Yes.
year, the same links.
Absolutely. So if you haven't registered, I'd recommend you do so. I think the afternoon session is getting pretty full. The evening session looked like it still had a lot of people, or a lot of spaces available. But it's not that common that we get that level of training just right here. We don't have to go to Salt Lake for it.
I can certainly vouch for the presenters. They're excellent and really
And you've sent out
knowledgeable.
an email on that.
We'll confirm. Have we sent anything
Yes.
out?
That link works.
The link is on the agenda she sent out.
Yeah, it's right here.
This one here at the
So
bottom.
you have that link in your, yeah. Oh, you've got it there.
Click on it.
It's on item
So
4.
click on register real quick and it should have something. Something's wrong with your finger. Doesn't work.
Right to it there from the.
Yeah, they have a number of different venues.
Yeah, just
It opens on that link in the.
It should open on the link. There's a bunch of good info. Oh, there you go. Oh, go scroll back up. It's right here. Must pre-register. Be sure to include. Trainers may include. Oh, Craig Call is another good one. Craig
That's
Call will
right.
be there.
Oh, is he the,
He wrote the book that you'll be receiving. He's an attorney that deals with a lot of land use law issues.
To be the
like variances
state
and appeal
ombudsman.
authority? Doesn't Craig
Ombudsman
do?
before Brent Bateman, and then Jordan Colmer is now after Brent Bateman. So there is a wealth of experience there. I'm serious, you could throw any question. They've probably got 5 examples to answer your question, at least.
They're just good presenters to make the information really understandable and
Palatable.
so, and give lots of examples, real-world examples, so.
Oh, it looks like Brandon's on here and it's showing that it's sold out. All right?
This afternoon, the email said it's almost sold out. So
Afternoon is sold out right now.
The evening is still.
Evening is open.
I'll be there in the afternoon.
Yeah, no one gets it.
Me too.
If I get done with the other meetings in time.
I'll be at the afternoon one.
I signed up for the afternoon.
Me too.
I'll be in the evening.
It's at the event center,
That's the county event center.
so we show up.
You won't have your book.
You won't get a book. You won't get a free book. No.
Stand by at the door.
I know somebody that's got an office.
If you sign up for the evening,
They lock the door.
you can just come back in again at 6 and pick
Yeah,
up the book.
and pick up a book.
There's all these other,
Anything else, staff?
Ooh, board member reports. Thanks for making that adjustment for the Holyoke Airport. I think I had a misunderstanding there and sent that to you because that was my recommendation from last time was let's hear this in February. But in reviewing the motion that was made, the motion was to continue up to 90 days.
Yeah.
So while you could have heard it tonight, I want every possibility extinguished before there's a revocation issued if needed.
Yeah.
So I'd rather cross every T, dot every I before you pull back a decision. So it doesn't hurt us, we'll just wait, from my perspective. So thanks for the patience there.
March agenda?
Yep, March agenda will be there. They have an appointment, or they're trying to set up an appointment with us right now for this next week to sit down and talk about possibilities. So they think they have some ideas for how they can do a realignment of that. I'm not seeing it yet, so I'd really love to see what their analysis is showing.
Are we wavering a little bit though with our first lineup on that? Because as I read back through the notes, when this started in September, we headed towards revocation. And then it appeared that they'd come before you guys and said, well, hey, we want to have a plan. But you guys told them, we've already headed towards revocation, so we got to pursue that first. Are we changing that now? Or are we just hearing their side, listening to what they have to say, and then proceeding the way we originally intended?
I think you need to finish your action to revoke or not revoke. So if your decision is not to revoke, and you can specify reasons as to why and say, we're not going to revoke it because you're doing this, they might be able to present convincing information that you decide not to revoke it. Now, say for example that they're unable to meet those requirements, we'll bring it back again to revoke the permit. But I think for clarity of action for them and for you, consider this revocation possibility and then make a decision on it, and then they can move forward with an amendment if they're going to pursue an amendment to the conditional use permit. If that doesn't work and they can't amend it, then that revocation should come back.
Just a quick question on that note. If we revoke it,
There's
and
nothing
that's
to amend.
unanimously passed by this board, don't they have to start over brand new at the CUP again?
That's almost what an amendment does. So for them, from a process standpoint, it won't feel a whole lot different other than we've started some discussion with what we need to do to amend the private airport standard. So we'll have a discussion with the attorney and decide if there's some element that they can be bound to whatever new decision is reached that would reflect those requirements. So a new application might come with different requirements, whereas an amended application would not. So on the one hand, if you revoke it, it could change some things for them. If you don't revoke it, they could still continue to pursue an amendment without additional considerations for the county code. Any other comments Angie, any other updates we have from staff? How's our meeting looking for?
Yeah, that was my next question.
Well, I just have 2 applications, both subdivisions, new that came in. There are a couple of pending items. The rezone to Cub River Estates 1, where we asked for engineering analysis of the access.
Yeah.
That may be coming back. I'm anticipating a report next week on that. I believe that might be all, plus for you.
Okay. Anything else from commissioners?
Thanks for the chat with.
Yeah,
Yeah, I discovered how to use,
We're all working on that.
docs.
He's gonna teach us how to use it better.
You
Oh,
went
yeah.
longer than I expected tonight, but,
So, yeah, maybe, can you walk me through like how to,
yes, let's just, maybe after we close, let's just have a sit down. If you have specific questions, you're always welcome to come into our office also, and I can just show you one-on-one. That's probably just as easy as.
With the way you guys got this set up, should we have been able to go in just to Google Docs and
Yes.
pull everything up?
Yes. So if you're having an
Somebody, I
issue
couldn't
connecting.
do that, I had to do the link.
Yeah.
If you're having an
I had
issue.
to go back through the link to get all the new letters.
This is okay.
on
This
there,
is
but other than
part of
that-
it.
If you have time, if you can make time, just come into our office and we'll check every connection and kind of walk through it. Or even if you have time tonight, sit down with Tim or I or Angie, Angie's on the way. Sit down with Tim or I and we're happy to look at it with you and see.
Angie
if
looks
there's
as sure as
a-
I feel.
Is the folder shared or is each individual item shared in that?
If the folder is shared, so everything in that folder should be available to you. So once you get into that folder, so for example, if we share the planning commission folder, everything in that for every planning commission meeting should be accessible to you.
But it's gonna be dated and it should be, if we hit the shared file, it should be numerical, the top one, and all I'm seeing is one from Angie, October 1st to 21. If I hit my shared.
Oh yeah, click on files, that's the trouble. And now look at the top, you can have my drive and there should also be one that says shared.
Right here.
No, there's usually, wow, again, this is looking different than mine. Let me grab it.
We can mess with it after, I don't wanna hold everybody else up.
Well, I have the same question.
We're all struggling with the same thing.
It's part of being handicapped.
I brought one of the backups just in case, and we can compare it on that.
I mean, Chris, if you want to give me an iPad, then I can get up to speed on it and be more helpful.
I think I forgot. And I'll show you where it's at. How about that?
Hey, you can have mine if you.
So you might get 7 of them here before you.
You remember the one that has phone connection? Yeah, you forgot.
That's the community.
Yeah, that's yours. Okay, so you are in
Well, so if I go to
Drive, right?
shared.
And so when I go into files, I have my drive and shared drives. That's what you're not seeing, is
Yeah,
that option to click
What?
shared
Me
drives.
neither.
Where are you seeing that?
Just,
Down here, isn't it?
I've logged into it, so I think there's an issue with how that drive was shared with you, the folder was
So
shared, and so you're not
that,
able
it
to
should
see
try
it.
that
You don't
one,
have
then
a
it should
shared
be
drive to
Goes
look at.
back to October.
If you go to shared, it doesn't come up. You have to go back to the link, so I don't think.
This is what I'm seeing when I go to that screen, so when
You
you're,
should have,
when you're going into,
you should have a whole folder for planning commission.
down here on the bottom, you can do
And I
these
don't have
different
that.
buttons.
I can
I
get
go to
into it
files, and I can click on drives,
Says-
or shared drives, and yours doesn't show the shared drive.
Nothing in this.
Yeah, but if I log in on the browser,
Sometimes they'll let you register as a guest.
then I
Maybe this one
then I
won't.
got it if I click share,
Hey Chris,
not in the app.
it's showing up on my computer as a shared drive, but on my phone, which is an iPhone, it's not showing up as a shared drive.
This is the same thing they have, and it shows up on here, so I've gotta figure
Yeah,
out.
so yeah, cause even
Mine
on
on
my
the
phone,
shared,
I
it just
can't
goes to
access the
this.
shared drive unless I go back to Tim's link he sent me.
So I think there's an issue with how the folder was shared, we'll just figure out why it's not.
Okay. Sounds good. Anything else, commissioners?
That's what I'm talking about here.
Yeah, I got to there too. Yeah, I got to files.
My
but-
drive,
Okay.
you guys don't have that.
Yeah.
I just want to say real quick, appreciate everyone's patience tonight.
figure it out.
And
We'll have to check.
if I've learned one thing over the years is that we are good listeners. And so despite what you may hear, we are good listeners. So appreciate everybody listening and your thoughtful responses to the questions and asking good questions of everyone. So thank you for that. And without objection, we'll adjourn.
tough, but like I said, choice to buy the ground.
I don't blame you.
Now, this might be though, because I already opened it. What have I done now? Now I can.
That one, but you're not gonna go back to the folder is the problem.
Probably end up being like
You're at home. Same place.
That's just showing me what I already opened, right?
Looked at, yeah.
and they may not even, there's a lot of back doing it, is there? A lot of hate and discontent.
Oh, heck yeah, they are. Just try to
But the
limit
property
the clamor
rights have
as
to
much
be still.
I apologize, I did not get the.
Yeah, and to some.
You did not what?
Did not add the date of approval.
Okay, so you just
I don't
need
need
my
you to. I mean,
signature, right?
thankfully, yes. But like
You'll
I
fill
felt
in
like
the
we
date.
could've passed it last time, except fill the date. There's a lot of these guys, the date of the approval, they're not ready to pass it, like, they're not.
Okay.
Today's date, and I'm like, I feel like we have to pass it.
He hasn't even got pretty big.
Water would be an issue, they can control it, yeah, they control it.
That he can mitigate any
That's the.
new risk he puts on any other landowners or the How to do that. Part of that river work that he wants to do is part of that. But, until Bill Young reviews it, we don't know if it's really.
Back away.
He has a pretty competent river engineer doing the study. So I think did that study based on river flows, or not river flows, channel cleanliness.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Right after we got done.
Oh, I know there are water issues out there.
In the river from.
Put in there adequate provision for water.
I said,
If
so
it's not
there's no
adequate,
freeze in the river.
they can't meet the condition.
Storm in October, so we'll rerun that. It's gonna change.
Good job.
There's a whole bunch of trees in the river right now.
Yeah, and so I said, there's gotta be something in there, because his long-term plan is to take out all the crack wheeler and replace it with natives. Again, he can only do it on his side of the river. I said, if this moves forward, you have to have somewhere in the conditions.
They got the front probably, walk all the way around the block. I don't need to walk around the block.
That was better than it could have been.
Yeah, I thought it went very well. I thought everyone listened well.
I talk more than I feel like I should, but sometimes it's like I think we really need to get this pointed in a direction. I found a problem. Yeah. We're gonna get shivved. That's why we still gotta get shivved in the parking lot. Here's one thing we
I can't get away from Excel here.
This mat is far too comfortable. They want to stand here.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's just a microphone.
Aborted nail.
Yeah, great job, Chris. It's always nice to have you manage that.
What's that?
It's so nice to have you manage that. Some of the stuff that was going on, talking to the audience, and just.
Yeah, I hate doing it, but like, if you just gonna start cutting stuff out.
They'll just walk over you.
Yeah,
You don't.
exactly.
Nope, I thought that was great.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
And then come over and it hooks on to 14 or something west, I can't remember the exact roads. That goes over the rock, I think it hooks on 14 west. Somewhere in there is also where the next 10 west.
Oh, the condition. Yeah, I just made a note, or else I would have just spaced it.
I was gonna make a note when I was remembering it, then as soon as I went to make the note, I was like, what was I gonna make the note? And it didn't
Well,
go back to it. So
it helps because I'm just sitting up, right? And you're out kind of balancing things. It's hard to stay. I don't retain things if I'm also trying to converse and have other address and approach and move other things forward.
so that covers, because that was key.
Yeah. Well, they all forgot. It's not like.
I just knew something as soon as you said it, I'm like, that's what I
Well, Megan said to make sure we catch that in the minutes because as I made that, she was doing something else and didn't get it quite right in the conditions. So I have it typed up in the document as a comment. So we can confirm that when the minutes come through that it's properly stated in the condition. Yeah, even if they appeal that, it goes to our Board of Adjustment who's only going to look at process. They're going to get worked up after that because they're going to think it's a de novo, kind of a review it anew type thing, and they'll just say, no, we're just looking to see if they follow the proper process. And the next step after that's district court. And they can raise that bar as much as they want, but they're going to start to dwindle their passion when they realize that they're out of line. I had to raise the question about the fence because I felt like you were, I feel like they were overstepping. That was good that you came and brought that up, and well, that's what they were asking for.
Thanks for, and then when I was talking to you, they brought it up themselves about it.
Yes, they wanted to discuss it. But it's, I think they've spent a lot of time discussing it, tried to address all the concerns. I think it was stupid of Lance to use, and stupid of what's his name to act in that fashion for that traffic study. That was just stupid. Well, just the perception. That was just all over the place. Just a bad idea. It shouldn't have done that. But it wasn't illegal. Lance still stamped it.
I said 2 or 3 things.
So inappropriate. Thanks, Angie.
This should be studied in the summer when all the kids are out playing. I said, actually, that's
yeah, that's true.
And then, he's the age and represent.
There's a lot of misunderstanding.
Did you have the recorder? That's what I can say.
Yeah, thought I gave it to you. give it to you.
Oh, it's in my pocket.
It's in your pocket, Angie. We were talking to, what's her face?
Megan, yeah, it's in my pocket. There are
I
two,
checked my pockets for anything.
yeah, 2 Italian sandwiches and 2 chips in there. I grabbed one, yeah. Well, he already got something, yeah. He already checked his box. Uh-huh.